Well, thanks for everyone for being here tonight. I wanted to give you an overview. This is not going to be in depth with everything we do in Chatham. We're doing a lot, and but I'm really happy to talk about it. I think we're doing some exciting things, and we're always looking to improve. So any suggestions that you have or questions that we have, go ahead and stop. I'll try and answer it briefly, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end as well. Next slide. So what I wanted to do is just first cover kind of what I'd like to cover tonight, what I'd like to talk about. Let's start with what is AUXCOMM, how is it different than ARES? A brief history, very brief, of of Chatham AUXCOMM, how it started and whatnot, the organization that we have, the membership that we have, what are the AUXCOMM requirements, which are a little bit different, and how do you get into the database, that kind of thing. Next slide. The activities we do, that's one of the more exciting things that I think we do. That includes the training that we do, how we track hours and why we track hours. What are the requests that we get from emergency management? We are trained as professionals, but we're unpaid. Obviously, though, we interact with paid professionals, and they treat us as equals, and that's really important for us, and I think it's helpful to them. What sort of deployment activities do we have? What we've had in the past, what potential we have in the future. The interface that we have with Chatham CERT, which is also an active organization in Chatham. Just a brief word about the PACE plan, what that is, why that's important. Then besides the activities, a little bit about the repeaters. I know that's important for everybody. Next slide, please. Oh, and then the types of repeaters that we have, and where I'd like to go with repeaters. That some of that's my agenda, but nevertheless, the WinLink training, that's a critical piece of our activities in AUXCOMM. A little bit about shares. I can't say much about shares because it's the kind of thing that I could tell you about if I'd have to kill you. So, but just a word about that and why that's important. And then why do we do what we do? We have an active group. We have lots of activities. And so I asked the group why it was important to them to be active, and what they got out of it and what they like to contribute. And then a little bit about where we're going, things we'd like to do to improve, and we're always open to suggestions. Okay, what is AUXCOMM? AUXCOMM is different from ARES in that ARES is an ARRL function. The way that we've always been told about thinking about that is you get some training, but you're not trained with the same procedures, the same policies that the emergency management does. So if you show up to an activity, they're going to say, well, what are you here for? You don't know our procedures. And so that's part of the reason that it's important to do the training that we do. AUXCOMM is really encompasses ARES, but it's more than that because we're required to do all of the ICS training. And so it includes ARES, but also this ESF2, which are the communication functions. It's the auxiliary functions for communication. So it's not just ham, it's other things too. That's where the WinLink comes in. We do non-ham frequencies. That's where the shares comes in. And we're also trained and assist on Viper radios, which is also used heavily by the state emergency management, as well as state patrol, highway patrol, all kinds of other activities across emergency management inside the state. So I think that's basically what I wanted to say with that regards. It's the training is important, and it's important to have that training and then act within the procedures that are set up for training, deployments, and other activities. Next slide. A brief history, very brief. And some of this is because a lot of this happened before I joined AUXCOMM in Chatham. It was originally founded by Nick, KA1 HPM. A lot of you know Nick very well. And also John Stone. John Stone became a silent key before I ever knew him. Nick, I miss him every day. He was a real force for us, and the Chatham AUXCOMM arose largely between those two individuals, and it started pretty much from a group of hams in Chatham County, as well as a cert course that Nick taught to basically get people interested in ham radio and take the test. The Chatham County AUXCOMM Society was licensed in December of 2018. We have, and then the club license was granted in April of 2019. We are not permitted to own any property by our grant, but we use all of the equipment that we don't individually own is managed through the Chatham County Emergency Management. Next slide. A little bit about the AUXCOMM organization, both in Chatham County, but also the state. We are one county in a statewide system. Not every county has an AUXCOMM group, but many do. Probably it's in the order of 50 to 60%. And that's an impression I have. I don't have the exact number of that. The state director is Tom Brown. If any of you know Tom Brown, he is a force, and he has won national awards and recognition for the work that he's done in AUXCOMM and organization, and providing the scope of the certifications as well as the activities in deployments. The state's divided into 3 groups, and they're obviously geographical: Eastern, Central, and Western. We're in the Central, as would be Durham County, Chatham County, Alamance County, Randolph County. The Central Branch Coordinator is Virginia Ensdorf. Many of you know Virginia, especially she's very active also with Skywarn. If you've taken the Skywarn course, which I think Virginia provided last year, you know Virginia, and she's quite a force also. Within Chatham County itself, I am the county coordinator. The deputy county coordinator is Ed Neely, who many of you know, W4AEN. We have a COML trainee, and that's Fred Gavillo. And of course, then our Chatham County Emergency Management Director, who is also a ham, is Steve Newton. And if any of you know Steve, he is probably one of the reasons that we are as strong as we are. Steve originally came from Wake County and worked closely with Tom. Tom Brown was actually the reason that Steve got licensed. And Steve is a general and is also very active with us also. Next slide. Although we're Chatham County, we have members in 3 or 4 counties. The one person that we had in Durham has stepped back a little bit, so I'm going to count him as a half. But most of our members are in Chatham. We have 1 or 2 from Orange County, and we have a new person who's been very active with us from Alamance County. I would say of the 15 members that we have, there's probably 11 of them that are very active. 9 of those 15 are extra licensed. 3 are general, 3 are tech, although several of them are working on upgrading their licenses. We have 4 VEs in the group. We've actually, with Dave's help, provided our first ham license in December of 2021 in Chatham County. And of course, we have Fred is our CommL trainee, and he's working diligently on trying to get that. Next slide. So the training is important, and I will tell you that having been through much of that training, some of it starts out dry, but when you actually get into it and then do some of the deployments and some of the exercises, you see where it fits in. What's required to get into the Chatham County database is the 4 FEMA ICS courses: 100, 200, 300, and 400. I'm sorry, that should be 100, 200, 700, and 800. That's a mistake. That's on me. Those are the current versions to be in the database. You should have the current versions. And they are taught online. You can take them online, so it's very easy to do. I was able to do all 4 of those in 1 week. And working full time. So that is, it's very doable. But I tell you, what's in the list as being recommended, and of course, as a county coordinator, is required of me. Those make sense once you take the 300 and the 400. Those are to take both of those courses, a 5-day course. I think 300 is 2.5 days, and the 400 is 1.5 days. So it's a week course, but it makes sense when you put all that stuff together. And those are the procedures that are used by emergency management. So when they get a call, or when we get deployed, and it could be anywhere in the county, it could be anywhere in the state, potentially anywhere in the country, all of the FEMA course and all the FEMA teams use those same procedures. So you can be coming from Hawaii and get deployed to Maine, and you'll know the procedures by looking at the forms. They're all the same, and this all happened post 9/11. So it's important to have that background. The other highly valued but optional, the AUXCOMM C, is a course that's a 3-day course, usually given over a weekend or a Friday and a Saturday, Sunday. That goes into great depth with what we do in AUXCOMM beyond what's in the 100, 200, 700, 800 course. And then, of course, the CommL, which is a communications leader, or the CommT, which is a communications technician. They get into the nuts and bolts of the training, as well as the T is the technical. So that's putting all the antennas up, making cables, and if something breaks, it's debugging, when things don't work. We don't have one of those in the county, so we all kind of chip in and figure it out as we go along, but that would be nice to have. We don't have one. Okay, next slide. So I mentioned a little bit about the AUXCOMM database. As I mentioned, 100, 200, 700, 800 are required to get into the database. Once someone completes those courses, and to be registered in the North Carolina AUXCOMM database, you usually have a primary county, but you can also be associated with 2 other counties. So if any of you are interested, we're looking for new people all the time, and we'd love to have you. So if you're in Orange or Durham County and take those courses, and you want to come see what we do, and please, we're interested in having you. That gets reviewed by the counter coordinator, which is me, and then assuming that everything is okay, that you have the current courses, then you'll be admitted to the database. What does that do? It puts you in the database. Steve Newton has told us if you're not in the database, but you're active, you come, you've got the training, it doesn't matter. He will use you in the county. What you'll be prevented from doing is if there's a request to help out another county, which we help out all the time. It's just like the fire department. I was a volunteer firefighter for many years. It's a mutual aid. So we help out where we're needed. And you would not be able to go outside the county. That would be a problem. Okay, next slide. So what activities do we do? So we have training nets, just like you have in Orange County. We have 2 training nets. We alternate it there every other week. We have a VHF analog that runs on the fire tower road repeater. And then we do a DMR net. DMR is new to us, but there's a lot of interest in doing that. DMR is very active in Eastern North Carolina. And so part of our reason for adding DMR is it adds another tool to the toolbox, but also if Eastern North Carolina, which heavily uses DMR, if they need help, we can help them out because we can get into their system. And I can talk a little bit about that, or if someone has questions about that. The nets are scripted, just as a standard net. There's usually 10 to 15 minutes training on the VHF net. The DMR net, we haven't really done much training per se, but it usually end up being training because we do kind of a round table rag chew, and training gets discussed in that as well. And we've only been doing that DMR net for about 6 months. Next slide. So we put in some time. We put in a fair amount of time between the nets. We also meet every other Saturday. We track. We have exercises. Our next exercise is tomorrow at 7:30. That is a Sharon Harris exercise for which we will be practicing for a graded exercise, because Sharon Harris has to demonstrate that emergency management can handle emergency situations. I'm sure that came out of 3 Mile Island. So we are tasked with certain activities during that exercise. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's radio. That's one of the things that when you volunteer for AUXCOMM and you go to an exercise, you may not have a radio. You may be doing something else, but you're active and you're helping out in the activity. The jump in the lake is coming up soon for us. There's going to be 2, I think, in May. 2 in May. What happens is the Army has contacted Steve because he's got a reputation of doing a good job. The Special Forces comes and does a parachute jump in Jordan Lake. We go there and we help check out Viper radios. We also then observe the jumps, and we're another pair of eyes on the parachuters that come out of the in case there's a problem, because sometimes they go off course or they may go out too fast. Fortunately, everybody's chute has deployed, but there's always that possibility. And there are certain signs that we look for that we've been instructed to. If we see that, we'll radio back to Steve and to command control so that they can get a boat out there to get to that parachutist. In April of last year, I believe it was, we did a lake clearing exercise. That was also part of Sharon Harris. We had to demonstrate if there was a disaster or an incident with a radiation leak at Sharon Harris, we need to be able to clear the lake. And how easy was that going to be? And so that was a big exercise that involves the State Patrol, 5 counties, the surrounding Sharon Harris. I think the Army may have been involved. Quite a number of activities, and we were out to observe the lake and what was happening on the lake. It turned out there was a big storm that came up during the middle of that exercise. So it was a good thing that we were there, because we were able to radio back to Steve to let him know, hey, there's some things going on. And we actually had to get the boats off the water during that exercise because of that. Other things that we track, and these are hours that we do, repeater installation and maintenance. Fortunately, Dan helps us a lot with that. Dan helped us put up our DMR repeater, which we did not too long ago. Testing, the go boxes that we use, we test those regularly. We set up the WinLink stations. Steve did a lot of that. He loves to play with that stuff, so that was good. And then putting together documentation for that, and we have a document on how to use that WinLink station with it's got an IC 7100 and a backdoor modem, and that's how we connect in through WinLink. Those hours that we track every quarter, I send how many hours we have to Steve. He submits those to FEMA, and they come back in terms of, there's a standard rate for what a going rate is. I don't know if it's $15 or $25 an hour. That money comes back into Chatham County. It may not come as dollars, it may come as equipment or other things, but that is important. And that would be important. That would be true for any county emergency management, to have those hours tracked. That's an important, critical piece. Next slide. One of the things that we have decided, since we have 15 guys, 11 guys that are very active. What are skill sets? The skill sets are different because we have a lot of extras, but we have some technicians. Some people don't want to go beyond technicians. Some people want to increase, but the skill set is different. So we have developed what we call a task book, which basically outlines different key areas that we think are important to be able to have. So we know if an incident comes up, who can do what. And so I'll just briefly tell you, we've organized, there are 22 specific areas. We've organized it into 5 groups, 5 basic areas. The first is onboarding. Onboarding just means when you come into the group, what do you need to do? What do you need to know? And we communicate often by signal within our group, not on radio. There's a code red message that comes out in case an incident comes up that would alert us that you need to either get onto the radio or get on a signal, find out what's going on. We use Groups IO just like OCRA. The FEMA courses, those are important to make sure you have those underway. We talk about the PACE plan, what that is, why that's important, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And OPSEC training. OPSEC is operations security. So it's situational awareness. That's a short training, 15 minutes online, but it's important to give you a sensitization for what's important from a security standpoint. Then the second area is basic technical. That's the stuff we all do. Co-extermination, which Bruce and Dan helped came down and did that for us. Ethernet termination, deploying an HF antenna in the field. It's nothing different than what everyone in this room can do. Next slide. Here's some things that are a little bit different. Administration, SARTOPO. Who knows what SARTOPO is? It's a mapping system that's used in emergency management. Was originally developed in California, CalTOPO, and basically it is the mapping system that's used within the county for all kinds of things. But you can overlay the topology on it. You can overlay housing units, who owns what property, weather reports can get put in, all that stuff. And that may come in if there's a search we need to do for a child that's been lost in the woods, or we have the Haw River, and their kayakers go out when the winds come up and the rain comes, and we've had to people off the river. EOC software, web EOC is commonly used in emergency management, and we don't actually put anything into that, but we will monitor that for Steve, because when an incident is happening, that's one of the non-radio things that we might get tasked with, and that's to monitor web EOC. Radio operations, it's the nets, the DMR, the analog, the use of ProWords, and then advanced operations is WinLink, Viper radios, and shares, which I'll mention a little bit later. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the first couple of exercises, the jump in the lake, where the Special Forces comes and jumps into Jordan Lake, which sounds a little crazy, but they actually have a good time doing it, and the families come. It's a big event for the families, and it's a good event and fun to watch people jumping out of airplanes, perfectly good airplanes. The Sharon Harris, I've talked about, that's required for Sharon Harris to get relicensed. So it's important that we do that well. The one thing I haven't talked about is the EHCP. As I mentioned before, Eastern North Carolina has very heavily DMR. They have an exercise in the fall. Their antennas are usually attached with hospitals, and it's based on the fact that if a hurricane comes, they're more likely to get affected by a hurricane than we are. And it's tied into their hospitals. Those are largely DMR, but they're also possible to get into that system through hotspots. And we have a couple of hotspots where we have that capability. So if we were needed for assistance with that, we wouldn't even have to go there. We can help with that. And the waterway clearing exercise I mentioned before. We do non-radio stuff. Steve Newton has threatened that we'll be doing the Christmas parade. It hasn't happened yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're asked to help with that. And of course, the reindeer run is actually done quite often through CERT, and many of our OCCOMM members are also members of CERT, and so that we help with that, just like you would on a bicycle race or a half marathon or whatever. Land searches, potential, that's another potential, the SARTOPO I mentioned. We have 2 individuals in our group that are heavily into SARTOPO, and that's both through CERT and just the interest in land searches and that kind of thing. So that's a potential. We haven't had to do any land searches, although when I was in the fire department, I did a couple of land searches. Disaster surveys, that's primarily done through CERT, but we would often assist for that. So if a hurricane came through, we might drive through a neighborhood and try and assess the houses, and then would radio back, or if the cell service is available, there's some software on your cell phones that can handle that. And then one of our members is quite tied in with the quartermaster function within the whole county. Next slide. Sharon Harris, I mentioned. I don't think we need to go into that, and also the jump in the lake. The jump in the lake, they actually fly out of an airport in Sanford, a small airport there, and the flight from Sanford Airport to Jordan is about 20 minutes. So they will do groups of 10 to 12 jumpers in a small plane. Every hour we'd see another 12 people come by. So it's a good activity. We have had a couple of jumpers. I think I mentioned that we had a couple of jumpers that didn't quite come down where they thought they were going to go. So they went into shallow water. One almost didn't land in the water. So, but it's good. And of course, we're very active in helping check out the Viper radios because they're commonly used in that situation, in that exercise. A little bit about CERT and AUXCOMM. As I mentioned, the foundations, the history of AUXCOMM was really tied in with CERT. There's always been a close association with CERT and AUXCOMM. Many of us are on both. Some of us serve on the board of AUXCOMM. The CERT director is a member of Chatham AUXCOMM, and many of us, as I mentioned, are also on that. Some of us serve on the board, and it's pretty common to have CERT and AUXCOMM be deployed at the same event or exercise. For the Sharon Harris exercise, it's a joint activity between CERT and AUXCOMM.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So CERT, we just went to CERT training, some of us here.
Okay.
And it appears that the definition of CERT used to be really focused on a neighborhood. Okay, you pick your street, your 10 houses, your 12 houses, and through what you're telling us and what we heard through that training, it really is kind of merging to almost be a part of an AUXCOMM like, or part of the, emergency communications group rather than focused on a neighborhood. Is that a purposeful change?
I would say that probably is a purposeful change. I think that CERT is an evolving group as well. What CERT was 10 years ago and what CERT is in another state may be completely different. They are all organized loosely through the federal government, through Homeland Security as well. But I think that it is changing, and some of that is changing with there has been a sort of a downturn in voluntary activity since the pandemic. And so that is in large part, I think, why some of that is changing. Okay. I just want to mention the PACE plan a little bit. That for us is a work in progress. I would say that our PACE plan, which we have, is beyond draft, but it is certainly continuously upgrading. And some of that is based on the evolving technology that we have in the county. DMR, we've only had the DMR repeater. We've had the DMR repeater probably a year. The DMR nets we've only been doing for about 6 months, maybe 9 months. So as that technology changes, as the phone system changes with what they're available to do when the towers go down, all of that will change our PACE plan. But PACE stands for Primary Alternative Contingency Emergency. It was originally developed through the military, and that is the order of communication activity that you move through until you can reach your objective, to reach the person that you're trying to make contact with. In emergency management, it's more of a precedent list. If cell phones are up, you don't need to use ham radio necessarily. If the cell phones go down and the internet goes down, what do you do next? How do you make communications? How do you contact if you're working at a shelter, or you've been asked to go out and survey houses, or help out with some activity? How do you make that contact if you don't have cell phone, you don't have internet? And that's what that plan is intended to do. You will also find PACE plans on the internet from other groups around the country, and they vary in all flavors. Some are very detailed, some are not. I think ours is somewhere in the middle, and it's something that that's an evolving process. It's also important to realize that all of the people that tie into emergency management in Chatham County, all the county departments also have their individual PACE plans. So they know And Chatham County has been hit with a cyber attack. It was back with the 2020 election. And I was actually working the election as an election assistant. And we came in and there was no internet. There was no internet in the county. All of the county computers had gone down. Now, by state law, the elections have to be offline. So there was no damage to the election per se, but everything else was, including cell phones into the county, all that was offline. So, we had to scramble, and fortunately there was a PACE plan in place. It's been upgraded now, I can tell you, but all of the PACE plan that we have is also tied in with the whole county. So that's I just want to mention that that's an important piece that we have. Repeaters, I won't spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, we have a lot of repeaters in Chatham County because we have towers and we have a very friendly emergency management. So that helps us a lot, and hopefully it helps you a lot too. The W4 UNC tower is actually in Chatham. It's just over the line. The Fire Tower Road is VHF antenna, and the tower that's on is where we put the DMR repeater. So that's where that is. The DMR repeater was actually funded by an activity CERT helped with the pandemic for giving vaccinations and organization with that. And the Chatham County Health Department was so appreciative. They said, what can we get you? What do you need? And fortunately, the CERT director says, well, could we have a repeater? And they said, sure. So we did it. That was really nice. And that's been a big boon to us. Right now, both of those are on the Fire Tower Road repeater tower. When we applied to CERT though for the authorization for the DMR, it was for the new tower, where the Chatham County has just built a brand new emergency management building. It hasn't been opened yet, but we expect it to be open in the next month or two. And there's a tower right outside there, and our DMR repeater is at the top of that tower. So we're really happy with that. And that's thankfully a lot to Steve Newton and his staff. DMR training is new to us. This is some of the things that we've been doing. Pi-Star hotspots, the training for that. The repeaters actually run off a Pi-Star Raspberry Pi as well. And when we put that in, something got messed up and I had to reprogram it on the fly. So that was interesting, but we got it up, and only about an hour longer than we thought it was originally when we mapped it out time-wise. We're always interested in more training. So that's one of the things on our list, and DMR is part of that. WinLink training. There are probably 3 core competencies that are most important for members. One is WinLink, and then the other 2 are going to be DMR and analog nets. WinLink is important because in emergency management, it's very important on an incident that you document and you have a paper trail, because all of this stuff gets involved in litigation. Plus, most of the people that are working those are not radio people. And so they want paper. They want communications to be paper. So if you don't have email, this is the way to do it. The training that we do is how to set up the software, set up the radio, how to send messages using a backdoor modem. That is one of the main ways that we use. But there are other software modems that work equally as well, and they are starting to be used more frequently in the shares emergency management type community. We have a WinLink station set up at the EOC in Steve Newton's office. There's also a Go box that's a WinLink station. And then of course, shares is also uses WinLink. That's the primary reason for shares that we use. There's a voice component to shares, but we don't do that. And then the other part of WinLink that you can do, it's not used often, is radiograms, requests for weather reports. WinLink is very commonly used for sailors out in the ocean. And so if they need a weather report, that's how they get their weather report. As I mentioned before, I could tell you about it, but I'd have to kill you. This is shares. What I can tell you is that shares is run through Homeland Security, CISA, which is the cybersecurity and infrastructure security. It doesn't require an FCC license to operate shares, but you do have to have the FEMA training. Now, that is the government saying you don't have to have an FCC license. There are two people that will authorize individuals in North Carolina to be active in shares. One of them is Tom Brown. Another one is Bob Rogers. Bob Rogers was he's retired from that activity now, but he is still active in approving shares and helping individuals with that. And Bob has been our main mentor, I guess you could say. Anything that I can tell you beyond that doesn't operate on ham frequencies. So radios have to be modified to be able to hit those frequencies. And then other than that, operating shares is like operating WinLink. You can operate WinLink on the ham frequencies and on shares, and it's virtually the same. So if you can operate WinLink, getting to shares just means that you've done more paperwork. The advantage of shares is that it's a lot less used than the ham frequencies. So in an emergency, that's where shares becomes important.
Mike, I'm going to ask a question. Maybe you'll have to kill me. Are these Mars frequency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Is everybody familiar with Mars frequency, military, amateur? Okay.
Okay. I don't want to overstay my welcome. Why we do this? We're giving back to the community. All of us are really that services is our motivator. We're working with like-minded individuals. We learn new skills. We learned a lot of new skills, and it keeps our skills current and tests our equipment. We help members with other with their equipment challenges, and develop friendships. Some of the closest friends I have are the people in Chatham County involved in AUXCOMM. And it also, just like Field Day, it challenges us. We set up activities and internal tests and exercises where we're challenged to see, can we make that connection? When we had the ice storm, we worked very closely with OCRA, and I can tell you Steve was really appreciative of that information and effort back. There was a lot of things that got done that would not have been known about through that activity. Next slide. Teaching others. Some of that is the ham licensing, but it's also teaching others. If you have a skill that somebody else doesn't have, that we'll work with you on that. One of the quotes that somebody in the group said is to give purpose to the training I've gone through with the equipment that I've purchased, and it's well beyond rag chewing. What we do well, simulating official traffic through organized nets. I would say that about half of our group are really competent in WinLink. The other half will get there. It's using WinLink has a huge amount of capabilities, and I'd love to talk to you about that too. Maybe we'll do that soon. It has the ability to set up templates, to do catalog requests, all kinds of things. Anything. It does mapping requests. If you send in a report with a specific information, it can develop a map, and you can see where the power is out and where it's not out, where the water may be out. It's incredibly powerful piece of information, and that's just one small piece of WinLink. Next slide. Use of Viper radios, that's been important in assisting emergency management in Chatham County. What we need to improve, we're always testing the system. We want to stress test the system, and simulated ice storms or real ice storms. That's and power outages. And as I mentioned before, the three critical skills: WinLink, analog, and digital voice. Whereas the last point is future. We need new county coordinator. The best thing that I can do is to develop somebody to take my job. And I'm always looking for that. I'm looking for partners too that can help out. And I've got a lot of partners in my group, but I want to make sure that when I can't do this anymore, that somebody else can do it. And so that's the number one goal on my agenda. We need new members. We're always looking for new members. How do we do that? Well, I've talked to Steve Newton about that. We're planning on sending out letters to all the hams in Chatham County. Are you interested in joining us? If not, just join us on the net, test out your radio. And maybe the thing to do is just to have a basic set of procedures so that if there's an emergency and we're up to our ears in alligators, that we can call on some other people. It's more hands. License exams. We're planning to do another ham class with CERT, and so we'll need more exams, or send them over to you. And another thing, one of the activities that happens in Chatham County is called First Sundays. The first Sunday of every month, all the businesses open up and people walk around, and it's like a big, it's like Apple Chill, for those of you in Chapel Hill. One thing is to set up a table and a radio and play radio and let the people be interested there. You'll always get people interested in doing that. So that's another way. And then we're looking for other ideas. So if you have any, please let me know. So that's what I have. We can entertain questions, or you can certainly contact me after the meeting, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Let me come with the microphone.
Thank you, Mike. So you talked about, every other Sunday or every other Saturday you're doing, trainings, and it seems extremely involved. What would be a typical time commitment for somebody getting involved? I mean, are they mandatory Saturday trainings, or everyone just does what they can? Or
so nothing's mandatory. The Saturday mornings end up being between an hour and a half every other Saturday. We're trying to keep that limited. Occasionally it'll go beyond that, but usually, well in advance. The nets that we have every Tuesday, they're about 30 minutes.
What would someone who lived in Durham, how would they benefit your organization? You said you had a Durham member that was there.
Well, you would get the same benefits that we would in terms of testing your equipment, meeting new people, helping out with activities. We haven't had the request for other counties, but it's happened in the past where we might get a call from Durham or Orange County or Randolph, and can you help out with this? We actually did get a call from Randolph County, and we were able to help them a little bit. Their problem was more political than radio. So,
if I can step in there, Mike. Mike, if I can step in on that.
We got one question on Zoom, and Jose would like to ask that first. Go ahead, Jose.
Hey, good evening, Mike, KD4JWF. And
good to hear you, Jose.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Good.
I just wanted to make a general comment to the group. I know that I also involved in AUXCOMM in Granville County here in Oxford, but I just wanted to let everybody know that Chatham County AUXCOMM has become the model for the state for any new AUXCOMM groups and to the emergency managers, because the program that they develop and to the extent they're willing to take the program. So this is a great opportunity for OCRA to learn from one of the best and one of the ones that we believe is the model for the rest of the state, and everybody from the state level will say that too. I just wanted to mention that to the group.
Oh, Jose, you're very kind. I wouldn't say that we were the top group. I'd say maybe we're in the top 5. But Jose, Jose came down for the OXC course with us, and Jose is a small group in his county, but he's quite good. So I appreciate your friendship there, Jose.
Thanks, Jose. Dan has a question, and we got another one here in the room. Over to you, Dan.
I just want to make a comment. In our July meeting about repeater coverage touched on this. We need to start thinking more outside of the box, and the box is the county lines. No one county has all the people or repeaters to do everything that county likely needs. And the other thing that is, if a disaster happens in one county, a lot of the people who would normally respond may not be able to. People outside of that county are the ones who need to help out. So the one comment, think out of the box, get out of, think tri-county or adjoining counties. How do we help each other?
When we had the ice storm, that wasn't limited to Chatham County, it wasn't limited to Orange County. And we reached out to everybody.
Yeah, that was an excellent example, and I really appreciate everybody that signed up to be net control and not rotating the shifts. We had people from Chatham, from Orange, and from Durham County, and we had more volunteers than we actually needed because we actually shut the net down at the request of Orange County EOC, before we thought we had to. So thank you, everybody. Got another question here in the room, Mark.
Yeah, I just wondered, what factors do you think contribute to the fact that you've built such an extraordinary organization?
I did not build the organization.
Not
I
you,
inherited it.
I mean, compared to other counties, I mean, it's just really.
I would say that we have a number of people who are very highly motivated and good, but in large part, I would put a lot of that. We're very fortunate to have Steve Newton and Nick KA1 HBM did a lot of groundwork before we did, and that is such a loss when we lost him. So yeah, but we have a good group. They're active, they're interested, and we're lucky.
Okay, we got another question from Zoom from Charles, KY4HU. Go ahead, Charles.
Great presentation, Mike. I I have a question. Why did you feel it was necessary to establish a separate organization called OXCOM? And because when I worked in emergency management, I would fill several roles on the ICS positions, but I didn't have to be a member of a different organization to fulfill each one.
That really comes down, I think, from the state organization and how that's organized. It's a separate organization outside of Chatham County Emergency Management, but we certainly are very much integrated into the system.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly where that comes from. And then, of course, the statewide system, AUXCOM, is really the way that North Carolina is operated and done in a way that we integrate in very, very nicely, seamlessly with emergency management in North Carolina.
Yeah, I understand that, but you know, why couldn't you have been an Aries group and fulfilled the OXCOM roles? Because that's what's normally done. Like
The primary reason is the FEMA
FEMA
training.
Say again?
The FEMA training.
Yeah.
We operate on the same system. We use the same forms, the same everything, the same organization as the rest of emergency management. If you go in and you don't train with them, they don't know you, you don't know them, they don't know where to use you. They'll tell you to go home.
We got one more, we got another person online, but Mike, would I be correct? I'm really going on a limb here, so feel free to throw something at me. We used to have races, then we had Aries, and now we have OXCOM. Is this the continued evolution of how the ham radio operators need to work with the respective emergency communications in the state? So really, it's the emergency communications and FEMA that are kind of setting the standard, not the ARRL anymore.
Correct.
So we're working with FEMA. So I think it's probably that evolution, and maybe, Charles, that might help the answer.
And I'll tell you that other states do it somewhat differently. So this is a North Carolina thing. The Aries group in Florida requires the FEMA courses. So they operate in the system. In that case, I would say that the line is very much more blurred between OXCOM and FEMA and Aries.
Okay, and that's used to be true here, because when Steve Album was the EC for Orange County, we all had the 1, 2, 7, 800 courses to be able to be, approved to work with the Orange County Emergency Management Group, and then all of a sudden it became OXCOM.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the Zoom here, and Fred can for QBZ. Fred, you're up. Go for it.
Thank you. You've hit on a couple of third rails for me. I want to come to the last one first. If we learned anything from 911, it's the need for interoperability communications. And we all have to speak the same language. And we've settled on the FEMA ICS language in the organization, the NIMS organization, and the ICS language for doing that. And that becomes universal across all. But then that touches back on to the first third rail, which I heard was, when that tornado comes across my property, I'm not getting out of the driveway. It can't happen. And I'm looking for you to come help me. And you should count on reciprocity. We'll be there to help you. And I think that's where the whole organization comes together and starts to make sense. That we speak the same language, have the same understanding of the organizational structure and how we can function and actually trust each other when times are tough. Thank you.
So if I could, Fred, I think, I asked a question earlier about CERT and OXCOM, and I think that tornado that knocks the tree down in your driveway is probably an excellent example of how your neighborhood CERT could only go so far, because CERT has nothing really to do with communications for the most part until recently, and now that's expanded and it pulls in the OXCOM part of it. So thank you for bringing up that example that addressed the comment I made earlier.
Yeah, And I would also say we're really looking at forward to somehow actively working with HOAs and local organizations that are only running FRS or GMRS radios, walkie-talkies and CBs, okay? And how do they communicate back to get 911 support when there ain't no PSAP, all right? We can serve a role there.
Excellent, excellent. We have another question or comment on the Zoom from Aurora. Aurora, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have some just kind of like technical questions about like various situations where you would use like DMR versus like UHF, HF kind of things. And also like what happens to all those things if you have a bad enough storm that like it also damages, it takes out the cell phone towers and it also takes out the repeaters because, you know, like anything on a tower might be vulnerable. Does that happen frequently? Like, and then does everyone just go to like WinLink? Like what kind of like, what different scenarios, how would different scenarios play out? I guess
That's what we have the pace.
Aurora, I
plan.
love you. We call it the PACE plan. And the end of the PACE plan is we're back to sneaker net. Okay. We got no other way to communicate except walk it. That's the end of the game, right? But what is the progression? How does this work? And how do we work together to move down that cascade? And oh, by the way, how do we move back up that cascade as services come back online? And so it's that dance, all right? And
So Aurora,
you put your hand on it. You really did.
so Aurora, before we knew how to spell PACE here in the old days of Orange County, what's that, 5 years ago, gang? We had that little card that I'm holding up in my hand here. Let me go in front of the microphone, in front of the camera. For those of you that can't read this card, what this card is, when you are on the Saturday morning net, okay, yeah, the camera's following. Let me stand next to my friend here so I can get in the camera. On the Saturday morning net, when you hear the net control script, you hear, this is the repeater we are on. Should this repeater go down, this is our backup repeater. That card also has simplex frequencies. And we used to do simplex tests to see who can actually hear who on VHF or UHF. And we couldn't spell PACE at that time, but that was our at least 3-level plan: repeater A, repeater B, and simplex. And I don't know if your PACE plan has some of that in it, but I would assume it does.
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, it's great that our somewhat semi-formal plan that we used to have now has an acronym, because then we can point at it and say we were almost there once. Any more questions or comments in the room? Yeah, Dan.
Can I just follow up and say like, I don't know those frequencies, and I bet a lot of other new members don't know either. Maybe we should have some more refreshers on that as part of our.
Yep.
That's something.
I
Great
was
training.
And you're correct, you don't know those frequencies, because that's something that, as part of the Tri-County repeater plan, we need to continue working with that. And that's something that we said in July that we have not yet done, okay, is we need to review the repeaters. The study that Dan did, who lives where, what repeater can we hit, what's a good backup repeater, what if you live in this area versus that area. So that's a follow-up to the July program that we had to be able to actually publish that. And Mike has another comment, I think. No. Okay. So that's a follow-up to the July program. And as far as we got right now is what is in the script. If repeater A fails, we use repeater B. And so you're right, absolutely right. And we need to finish that.
And our PACE plan anticipates that you will be on one repeater at quarter after the hour, another repeater at 30 minutes after the hour, another repeater at 45 after the hour, back to the first repeater on the top of the hour, and you keep rotating through. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go to any repeater anytime and see if you can make connection. But if you want to increase your probability of success of finding somebody, that's where you can hunt. And oh, by the way, there's another set of rally points for HF. And those are national. Okay, so there won't be anybody in North Carolina, but you might find somebody in Michigan that can help you.
Let me do one more comment about our 10-meter net PACE plan, folks. So every week, Monday night at 8 o'clock, unless we're here, and we're here tonight, where there is no net, we meet on 28.450. What if there's somebody on 28.450? What do we do then? Up or down 5, okay? So even for the very casual weekly 10-meter net, there's a plan B and a plan C, up 5 or down 5. And we've had to use it the last 2 weeks. And Bob has a question here in the room. W4FK, over to you.
Okay, just speaking, hello, just speaking to the backup repeaters or simplex channels, stuff like that. Anyone who's a member also of the DFMA club and has that directory, on the back cover of that, there are listed primary and secondary simplex frequencies for several of the area counties.
It's the same as the card. Yeah, D, well, here.
Yeah, that back cover of the directory was taken from that card. Now, a few repeaters are gone or have changed, so it's been somewhat updated, but as Bruce said before, we really need to update our, what's a good backup. I don't think our current backup is the best one. I would recommend a different one, but that wasn't the case when this was done 15 years ago, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, thanks.
Yep, that's a true statement. And one more thing that we did with Dan's study, we have the ability to say, well, what if I've got a 5-watt HT with a rubber ducky antenna? What is my backup repeater? You probably don't have one. Okay, OCRA, the 450 repeater is probably about the only repeater you're going to hit unless you live really close to one of the other repeaters that is not at 1,200 feet in the air. So we can put together the backup plans of what would be a logical repeater. But to Dee's comment, I mean, we've got people that live in Chapel Hill, and Doug is on the phone on the Zoom right now, that cannot hit certain repeaters because he's got this giant mountain in his way. And by no means is he running 5 watts with a rubber ducky. He's got 50 watts and an outside antenna. So for us to be able to put together a comprehensive plan A, plan B, plan C, what works for me may not work for you. So we need to really take some time to do that.
What's keeping me up at night is that there's something like 200 ham radio operators or 200 licensed ham radio operators in Chatham County. There are 15 members. They all have at least HTs, and we may need them. And how do we get them into the organization when that time comes? And when I say into the organization, how do we get them to participate?
True statement. True statement. Any other questions for Mike? Mike, did you realize that the last slide was going to be the most active one? Okay, first, I would like to really thank Mike for putting this presentation together. I think this is the most participation we have had from the membership for questions, comments, and post-presentation conversation yet. Well, in the year and a half that I've been year and 2 months that I've been doing this, that's for sure. Mark's trying to get the camera to come back up here and say hello to me. Here it comes. Okay, sorry, folks, you're going to get to see me now instead of Mike. Mike did a fantastic job. Don't be afraid of what he said. These guys have been down there doing this for a couple of years now. You want to get your feet wet, join the net sometime. Listen to what they do. Chances are you're not going to get assigned something other than check in and listen, check out when it's time. Bob has already taken all 4 of the ICS courses. I have taken 1. I took all 4 before when we had to have them, but they're all changed. So bad me, I've only taken 1 of them. But you don't need help doing that if you think you might be interested. A while ago, we mentioned this at one of these membership meetings, and I sent out an email the following week with URLs, how to get to them. If you don't have it, I'll be more than happy to send it again. It's a little hard to find them on the government website. You can find things that look like them, but it's really not the questions and answers and dialogue and everything that you really need to do that. So anyway, Mike, thank you. Dan has another comment before we get on to the next topic.
I would like to make just one very quick comment in that this PACE plan that was talked about with what's happening with landline telephone service, if you happen to remember that, what's happening with the lack of internet coverage availability to many of our members, we all are getting out on a thinner and thinner thread of being able to communicate out of our homes if we were to have a fire or a health situation where we had to get contact with 911. And I would like to encourage, and maybe it's something we do, is maybe think about what would be your personal answer. Do you have two ways to communicate out of your home if you had a serious emergency? I no longer have that because landline no longer works. Even Bruce has fiber. He has no cell phone coverage at his house. So if that fiber goes down, he has no way to call 911 if he were to have a fire. Think about your personal situation and how exposed are you, and maybe we might want to talk about this. We used to always say, when all else fails, ham radio works. One thing we need to think about, the people who actually monitor the repeaters that we have is less and less. If you had an emergency and you called out on a repeater, how many times have you called out and nobody answered? We can fix that. Maybe we ought to think about it.
Good point, Dan. And maybe we just came up on a topic for a Saturday morning training. Is everybody that checks into Saturday morning training, you know, what type of capabilities do you have to communicate? What is your primary? Okay, what's your alternate? You know, walk through some of that so you actually think about it. If you had to do that, what do you have? And if I stand in the right place and turn around 3 times, I do get cell coverage, but you have to be in the right place.
If I
Okay.
can jump in on that too, Bruce, if you would, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
It's called ground truth. Ground truth. It's having that eyes on the ground, having what is the situation in your neighborhood. And that is so important to the whole emergency management system. You know, where is the electricity working? When is it out? What carriers are not working? You know, AT&T is out, Verizon is working. Those things really matter. And so being able to report that back into a central place where somebody can make sense out of it and come up with a plan of how do we deal with it. That's incredibly important.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so now that we've got everybody's appetite whet for AUXCOMM, emergency training, and some services, let me tell you a little bit about what the March program is going to be. You're going to get to see Mike again. And you saw his slide. See, no, not me, Mike. More applause, more applause. In March, Mike is going to do a WinLink trading for us. We're going to have in the room here, we're going to have a radio and we're going to have a modem, I imagine. But those of you that are on Zoom, do not panic, because Mike is going to come over to our house with his software and we're going to load it up on our laptop. And what you're going to be able to see if you're on Zoom and not in the room, you will see exactly what goes on in WinLink software, because we'll be displaying that over Zoom. So you won't see the computer, excuse me, you won't see the radio, but you all have seen radios. You will see what is on the laptop, which are the screens associated with WinLink, and potentially how do you create messages and send messages and some of that. So again, trying to keep the experience on a level playing field for those of you that are on Zoom and in the room. That will be March. So it should be a really good presentation. And Mike, thank you for doing this 2 months in a row.